Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on our complimentary webinar, Driving Adoption for Better Learning Outcomes. Today's panelists are David, Principal Learning Analyst at Brandon Hall Group, and Vinod, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Litmos. And a big thank you to our sponsor, Litmos. Before David gets started on the topic at hand, Vinod, can you tell us a little bit about Litmos?
Yeah, so Litmos is an award-winning learning platform that actually we have built with learners' experience in mind. It's mobile first, it's very connected, it's open, it's very secure. We are actually the one of three vendors with SOC 1 and SOC 2, SOC 1, SOC 2, Type 1 and Type 2 security certifications. We are part of Analyst Cloud, which is a multi-billion-dollar company. The slide that here you see, guys, is the continuous learning suite. So that's how we are positioning Litmos. If I may, I mean, what the position of Litmos is that for employees to engage and for your customers and partners to engage, learning needs to happen in the fabric of the employee's life, right? To create great learning experiences that move the business needle, learning needs to be part of their digital footprint, right? It's like my kid. When I see they go to the formal training in classroom, right? But at the same time, they have this digital footprint through mobile devices and all that they are learning socially and through news channels and all that. At the same time, they are meeting their peers and learning through them and going to all of these coaching classes where they are learning team building skills and all that. So similarly, at the core of our platform is the Litmos core platform, which is a very secure and scalable platform. David, if you can click on it. Yeah. So it's a very secure and scalable platform that actually we have built to start connecting all of the devices to this, because learning cannot exist in a silo, right? So we have built a marketplace of connectors around this core platform so that you can connect to all of your other applications in the ecosystem, right? And we have made it very easy, point and click, easy connectivity, and all that. And because no learning can also can exist without a great content, we have built content. So what we have done is we have gone ahead and acquired a company called Learning Heroes, which we are calling Litmos Heroes right now, and we already have 2,500 over 2,500 courses with over 7,500 modules. That is part of the Litmos core platform. And these courses are mobile ready, they are easy to use, they are bite-sized, video driven and all that. So, we are providing you the content that will actually engage your employees in the moment that they are, without, having to go to, without having to worry about, okay, yes, do I have to burn a number of hours to learn something on the job training kind of a thing. So together, all of that core and everything comprises of 4 basic elements. And the first one is the Litmos, in the learning management suite that Litmos provides. And as I said, it's mobile first, it's, built with learner experiences in mind. It's very secure, it's very scalable, it's connected, it's open, right? And the second part is the commerce, which is the training operations part of it. So we've acquired this company, View Central, 1 year back, and we've actually integrated it with our Litmos LMS to provide global companies for selling training as a business. So now you can sell your training as a business, and it's a deep down with resource management, subscription management, certification management. Nothing like this actually exists in the marketplace, because it provides you everything that you would need to run your training as a business. And now what we have done is we have added coaching and mentoring capabilities to Litmos. So we've brought into the Litmos suite of products our Analyst Cloud coaching product for employee development, objective setting, sales coaching, mentorships, you name it, and all of that can be done through this coaching product. And to combine all of that through your structured and unstructured learning, we have brought Litmos Enable into the fold of the Litmos suite of products also. This also was a sales enablement product from Analyst Cloud, which actually gives us the capability to enable your whole organizations through content. So basically, you can go and do peer-to-peer learning. You can create portals for one-to-one learning, one-to-one conversations and learning with your customers and partners and all that. You can actually get learning content or learning courses being suggested while you are searching for the content within the system itself. So, bringing that structured and unstructured learning together so that learning is happening when you need it, where you need it, and on the device that you need it. Yes, David. So we can move ahead, David. And all of this is actually tied together through our augmented intelligence platform. So because we've got all of this suite of products, and because we know the data that is there in those products, and we are connected to all of the different apps like HR apps and CRM and all that, we know about our learners, like what certifications they have, what employment history that they have gone through, attainment data with the CRM integration, training history, browsing history, what their interests are. So collecting all of that data, we can run very intelligent machine learning algorithms to personalize learning. And what the augmented intelligence means is that not only we will learn the machine learning algorithms to personalize learning and recommend you courses or content in the moment, on the job, but also what we provide the capabilities for the managers and learners to actually go and tweak what the machine has actually recommended and actually augment that with their own information and all, so that when the next time the machine learning happens or the recommendation happens, it is much more accurate. Yes, David. So, and all of this actually, we've been around for 9 years now, and but in the past 5 years we have seen that our positioning in the market and what we are doing in the market has exploded. So Litmos has grown from 10,000 users to over 5 million users across the globe. 40% of the Fortune 1000 companies actually now use us. We have deployed 30 million courses on our platform. We are on pace to have 1 billion API calls per year into our platform, and we have been rated as #1 in customer satisfaction by independent review sites and all that. And the proof and the pudding is all the awards that we have won, right? We are in the top 3 of Brandon Hall Group's Excellence in Technology Awards. You can see all of the other awards that are here, and we are on the top of all the independent review sites for B2B solutions, example being G2 Crowd, Finances Online, GetApp. So certainly we are doing something that is actually making a mark in the learning space, because we believe that learning needs to happen when in the daily fabric of your life. It has to be weaved into your lifestyle. There's a learner genome that we call it, that has to be included in the learning, where you are doing coaching, mentoring, where you're doing on-the-job training, peer-to-peer learning, and the learning is contextual, personalized, and relevant. Thank you, David.
Great, thank you for the overview. And before we get started and sort of jump into some of the research and insights that we've pulled together for you, I just wanted to remind everyone that you're able to ask questions in the question box in your control panel. So please do that throughout. You don't have to wait till the end. If you have a question, feel free to ask it, or even just any commentary you'd like to make. Go ahead and use that question box. The slides are available for download in the handouts section of your control panel, and we're also recording this, so a link to this recording as well as a link to the slide deck itself will go out within the next day or two. So you can do that, and again, I encourage you to use the question box as we go ahead. And so, Vinod just spent some time giving you an overview of a platform, the Litmos platform, and all of the different things that it can do. And organizations very often roll out new technology platforms, something like Litmos, or even just a new learning initiative. And even if the platform is spectacular and does all these wonderful, great things, there is the challenge of adoption. How do we get people to actually use either the platform that we've just acquired or the program that we've just rolled out? So what I want to do today is spend some time talking about that piece, adoption. How do we get people up and running? Because again, it's one of these things where it's not necessarily if you build it, they will come. People need motivations sometimes, and there's different strategies that you can use to boost adoption, whether it's to using a platform or to engaging in a learning initiative that you put together. So By definition for this session that we're doing today, what is adoption? So it's when a majority of your attended audience participates in the learning event or logs into and uses the learning platform that you've rolled out. And that's what we're striving for, right? That's what we're all looking for, is improved adoption. We can't begin to measure other outcomes if we don't have any adoption. So that's where it all starts. Obviously, there are barriers to adoption. That's one of the things that that slows things down. And here are some of the things that we hear the most from organizations when we talk about this. What is it that's keeping people from using either the new learning platform or the initiative? And it's just, the first one is employees are just too busy, right? They just have too many other things going on. They have their actual jobs that they're doing, and all of this stuff seems very separate, and there just isn't room for them to do this. We also hear that employees tend to think that they already know what the material is. Like, I don't need to log into the system. I already know what I need to know to do my job, or I don't need to enroll in this learning initiative because I'm already on board. I understand everything. This is a challenge that we hear a lot within organizations, that training already has such a bad reputation, employees tend to avoid it. They'll go out of their way to not have to log in. And there are a lot of things that work here, and we'll talk about some of these strategies moving forward. But we see in our research all the time that user experience is one of the greatest challenges to a learning platform. If a learning platform, an LMS, whatever it happens to be, is outdated or counterintuitive, just not that easy to use, the first time people use it, that's the impression they get, and that's what they stick with. And very often their reactions and their interpretation of the experience doesn't even have a lot to do with the content. The content could be great, right? You can have access to this wonderful material that tells people what they need to know. But if their experience in accessing and getting to that content is poor, that's what they'll remember. And another part of this is, typically with people, the first experience they have in a learning platform within an organization is a compliance experience, right, as a part of onboarding. And traditionally, compliance has never really gotten the kind of attention that other types of learning, say, like leadership development, gets. So it tends to be pretty static, not too engaging, and that ends up being the first experience people have, and it sticks with them and taints the rest of the learning experience moving forward. I mentioned systems are hard to use, so this one's always been a challenge, and it's number one, or at least in the top two in the past few years of things that are liked least about organizations' LMS, the system they're using. What's interesting is it also makes the list of things that are most liked, is when they're easy to use. So what that tells you is, when it's good, it's good. People really like systems that are easy to use, but when it's not easy to use, it's very, very bad. So it's not as though it's a middle ground with, oh, it's okay. It's either, if it's easy to use, it's great and it makes the top of the list, or if it's hard to use, it's terrible and it makes the top of that list. So it's really critical that we focus on things like ease of use. And then the other part is, nothing seems relevant. Right? It's like, why am I looking at this training? This makes no sense to me. I don't understand why I'm looking at this based on what my development plan is, or what my role in the organization is. So, why should I even bother? So these are the things that we hear the most when we talk to organizations about learning and why adoption is such a challenge. So one of the things that organizations can do to mitigate a lot of these things is to start thinking, at least learning functions can start thinking like marketing functions, because that's what marketing does. Is it's all about reaching people, pulling them in, getting them engaged, and getting them to consume whatever it is that we're pushing out. And we think about things like social. We have 73% of companies have a dedicated social media team for marketing, so they're out there trying to contact people through all these different informal channels, whereas only 24% of companies say that they've significantly explored social media for learning. So learning is not trying to reach out to their audience in the ways that marketing is reaching out to their audiences. And the challenge with that is, if you think about how marketing works, right, and you look at this in parallel to the way learning is delivered, you can see that, okay, broadcast your message and they will come. That's the mass marketing. Like, here's what we have, here it is, I push it out, now let's sit back and wait and see what happens, right? That's where it used to be. And then marketing was able to say, okay, let's just target our message to these specific groups. Instead of just throwing it all out there, everybody, we can still broadcast, but we're going to go to specific groups. And then there's, we can actually make much more focused communications based on the analysis of those segmented groups. We know more about them. We can put that into place. And then you can actually monitor customer behaviors. What are they doing? So now we can deliver the marketing message that meets their needs because they're telling us what they want, how they do things, so we can do that. And then we're at a point now with all these different interactive conversations, like just the complete connectedness of organizations to their consumers, using all of the different types of communication channels available to them to create this multi-layered communication system where there's almost any way possible to reach out and to get information back from your audience. So you can see how far that's come. Now think of that in terms of learning, right? This is very parallel to what we can do in learning, but chances are your organization's somewhere around here. You're creating a bunch of learning and you're pushing it out there and you're hoping the people that get it can use it. Maybe even a little closer these days to segmented marketing, but really that's where learning tends to be in general. There are organizations that do it better, that are further up this line, but overall this is what we tend to see. So marketing is light years ahead of learning as far as understanding their audience, delivering what they need, and seeing results from that. So we start to take a different frame of mind around how we deliver learning when it comes to the learning initiatives, the types of platforms and tools we're using. If we have learning platforms that allow us to do these things, that allow us to target and segment and incorporate feedback and information from our learners, we're going to do a much better job of engaging those people and delivering to them. So this is one of a few different types of models around what happens with user adoption. This is Everett M. Rogers' diffusion of innovations, and so where do things go when it comes with adoption? And you can see that, you know, where the percentages are that they're first innovators. That's the group that just jumps right on board right out of the gate, good to go, even ahead of early adopters, which about 13.5% of people fall into that category. The big chunks are the early majority and the late majority, where, okay, the early adopters are up and running, then there's a group that gets on board, and then the other group that finally does, and then there's the laggards, which maybe never get on board. And there's a version of this where there's a much wider space between the early adopters and the early majority to indicate that there is this, and it's called the chasm. There's a chasm between those two groups where it doesn't necessarily flow very seamlessly and easily from that first group of innovators and early adopters into the early majority. There is a lot of work that has to happen in there to get that done. But just to keep in mind that this is what you're up against, right? I think a lot of times organizations put these great initiatives together, or they purchase this wonderful platform that they're all excited about, and they have this idea that at least this front half of people are all going to be innovators or at least early adopters. They're convinced, because I love this so much, everyone else is going to love this so much. Unfortunately, that is not the case, right? There's a lot of work to do to get people on board and get them to use and engage in the system or the initiative. So the different stages of the adoption process, right? There's the knowledge, I'm aware of it, I know that it's here. Persuasion, I'm being convinced that I should use it, there's something to it that needs me to do it. There's decision that I'll do it, and then there's the implementation and the confirmation that yes, I've adopted this now, I get it, and I'm going to use it. This is where the key is, right? The first part of this, going back to that ease of use, and also a thing called perceived usefulness, like this is going to help me, right? This platform is going to help me be better at my job. Those are the key elements in this first part of the adoption process. We really need to make sure that we're doing a good job here. We're highlighting the usefulness and the ease of use of the system that we're using, or we'll never get to implementation or confirmation. So things to keep in mind about going back to some of those barriers. So you also have to ask yourself, does your organization have a culture of learning? And so what are you up against just from a cultural standpoint? And because there are certain organizations that just are more driven to adopt learning. There has been a perceived culture of learning from the top down that pervades the entire organization. So, this is what a culture of learning sort of looks like. Is there the ability to have feedback from managers to employees on a regular basis? Right, so here's how you're doing, because this helps develop that culture of learning of, if I know how I'm doing and I know where I need to improve, then I can go and actually do that. And having a system that then allows you to easily find out where you can go, fill in any gaps that you may have and improve is going to go a long way to making everyone perform better. Does your organization promote managers from within? right? So are you developing people internally? Are you providing the learning that allows people to move into these roles? That's another characteristic. Part of the company culture is sharing knowledge and information, and it sounds almost like common sense, but I think all of us have had at least some experience in an organization where people don't want to share knowledge of information. People hoard it, and they try to hold on to it to make themselves either more secure or feel more important, whatever it happens to be. But an organization that has a culture that allows for much better sharing of knowledge and information is going to have a much more effective learning culture and end up with better results. It sounds funny when you talk about all these new and interesting things and you listen to Vinod describe the Litmos platform. At the same time, we still need to have the ability to formalize a lot of these training and development processes. And it sounds counterintuitive to all of the new elements, but part of a culture of learning is being able to embrace all of the new and different types of technologies and modalities and at least formalize them in some way so that they are coming from the organization, they're providing the right information, you're able to track and measure these things. So there is a bit of formalization that goes on. And then being able to recognize or compensate employees for their learning. This goes into this engagement piece. There are organizations that actually flat out compensate certain learning and development benchmarks, or just at least recognition that you've achieved something. And that could be as simple as points or leaderboards, and we'll talk a little about that, or it could be as grandiose as, company-wide recognition of completions or some sort of certificates and things like that. But anything that can drive that engagement, that adoption, how do we get involved in this? And so going back to that knowing your audience piece, right at the beginning, we talked about how marketing does this. Well, we asked companies, what do you know about your learners? And we asked them, what information do you include in your learner profiles? And beyond, someone's title, obviously they're going to have someone's name, but beyond their title and maybe a picture, you start to drop off with, areas of expertise, areas of interest, things like that. So learning definitely doesn't know as much about its audience as, say, marketing and or sales does. And so learning could really learn from marketing to get a better handle on who are my learners, who is the audience, what are their areas of expertise. If somebody does have an area of expertise, I can connect them with other people who need to know about that information. All different kinds of items can be kept in a profile and then used to create not only more personalized, contextualized experiences, but also connect people of like interest or like needs and be able to deliver on that. So again, learning can learn a lot from marketing as far as understanding your audience. Another piece of understanding your audience isn't just having a bunch of data fields filled out. It's really understanding what's going on. I've seen time and time again where an organization will say, well, we know that mobile learning is hot and people need mobile learning. Everyone has a mobile phone, so we're going to create this mobile initiative for learning, and we're going to push it out. And then it turns out, well, nobody really accessed it, nobody did it, and we don't understand why. Well, they didn't check and see first if that was something that the learners were actually interested in. Did their audience within their organization actually want to do this? And just because everyone does have a mobile phone and it's become ubiquitous and we do everything on our mobile device doesn't necessarily mean your audience wants to access what you're pushing out on a mobile device. So it's also very interesting, very important to understand what your learners want, and that can be done various ways, either through message boards, discussion threads, or just straight out surveys. But just understanding for everything you do, whether it's a training project or a tool or an implementation, do the learners actually want it? Do they need it? And then if it were you, if you were them, would you use this platform? Would you take this initiative? What is it about it that makes you convinced that it's going to be engaging and useful? So make sure you understand those things before you dive in. So you can conduct a learning needs survey, right? Finding out from your audience what it is that they want, what training would help you do your job better. How can we can help you grow in your career? When do you prefer, right? This goes back to, do you have a smart phone or a tablet? How do you prefer to access information? And then be careful with learning styles. Don't just get wrapped up into, the whole idea of, well, this person's visual and this person's tactical or tactile or whatever it is. Just be sure that you're more concrete in what it is that they want, as opposed to more abstract learning styles. So finding out from your audience what their needs and wants are will help you create and deploy tools and initiatives that better match their needs. So we talked a little about incentivization and getting people engaged and wanting to take part. And we found that leaderboards and point systems can be effective. They work in a way that allowing people to achieve something for the learning that they would already be doing. And you're just adding this gamification element, not necessarily turning the learning into a game, but adding an element of achievement and recognition that tends to motivate people intrinsically to want to do more, do better. Again, you have to know your audience. And you have to be able to provide the right incentives. You don't want to incentivize the wrong behaviors. If you set the system up where it's simply collecting points based on a quantity of things, people will just do that thing over and over again until they get the points. Make sure you put some thought into how you're building this out. But Vinod, if you don't mind, if you're not on mute or if you're available, I know we're showing a screenshot here of how the Litmos platform handles leaderboards and points. If you want to just talk a little bit about how you guys present this to your client companies.
Sure. So basically, what the gamification is about is you need to embed game mechanics into your learning itself. So within the course itself, you should be able to define your badges. What is the performance skill that you're using? What are the competencies? What are the skills that the learner is going to achieve? And it all has to map down to the profile of the learner, right? And you should be able to search on it. You should be able to report on it, and you should be able to feed that data into your machine learning algorithm to actually personalize the learning in the moment for the learner, right? So gamification not only plays a very important role for engagement and adoption, but it also actually becomes a feeding point for checking the next milestone or what else needs to come to the learner and what other competencies and skills that they need to develop. So for example, in the reporting we talk about gamification in the sense of so how do you really know that you're getting the ROI out of your learning engagement, right? And so you can run a report which actually shows that what competencies and skills that the learner have learned by going through the specific set of courses that they have gone, or by going through the content, right? Because our enabled system also, which is basically a content management system and provides unstructured learning, provides you game mechanics in that. So you can combine that structured and unstructured learning and deem from it that, these are the competencies and skill sets my learners have gotten by going through that structured and unstructured learning. And these are the skill gaps that they still have, and I need to push these kind of materials for them. And that actually shows the ROI of the business outcome, tying the learning to the performance.
Right. And one of the pieces of understanding your audience is if you do roll out something like a leaderboard, you really don't put it out there and just leave it. You want to pay attention to how your learners are reacting to it, because I've seen some organizations will do a leaderboard and they're just a handful of people who are motivated by it that really like to be at the top of the board, and they do all the right things and they just dominate the top few spots on the board. But then there's this other group that looks at the leaderboard, realizes that they're not on the top of the leaderboard, right? They don't even make it onto the screen because they're not that high, they're not up high enough, and they just say, well, forget it, there's no point, right? Why should I even bother about the leaderboard? I'm never going to be up there and I won't do it anymore. So keeping an eye on how much of a split there is between people that are motivated by it and those that are not, because there always will be some that are not, making sure that it's not too heavily weighted on the negative side, that people are just not engaging because they're not getting on there. So it's something that's living and breathing. You have to pay attention to it and keep on top of it as it moves forward. So we talked a bit about the whole idea around learning from marketing. So, when it comes to engagement, like I said, it's very simple, in simple terms, the idea that you can't simply go out and, let's say, purchase the Litmos learning platform and then turn it on and sit back and expect everyone's going to understand what's going on, why it's happening, that they're just going to flock to it and start clicking on it, multiple times a day. There has to be some communication and marketing around the whole process. So does your organization have a corporate communications team? These are the folks that know how to do this stuff. And if you do, partner with them. Figure out how do we get our message throughout the organization in a way that's going to get people excited and engaged about what we're doing. And there's multiple opportunities in any organization to advance, the advent of a new learning platform or a big new learning initiative that you really want people to take part in. That you can throw ads on the intranet. Time and time again, the videos or blog from the CEO, looking at it on paper sometimes sounds like, well, that can't possibly work. That just seems, people will see right through that. But over and over and over again, I hear that when the CEO comes and either visits or does a video talking about, listen, hey, we're rolling this platform out and here's why, and this is why we're excited about it, and this is what it means to us, it actually works. People get really invested in it. They get it, okay, look, it feels as though I'm not being told to do this for no reason, right? Our executives are on board. They want this for the company. It really helps with the motivation. So that top-down buy-in and having those people champion the new tool or the new platform is critical. It can always help. The signage in the lobby or in the kitchen, I've talked to other organizations and they've put together these fun little programs where they'll create either a character or a theme, and then they'll have pictures that are around that theme and they'll have it around, and it really works. They go back to the incentivization piece, the lunch with the CEO for, maybe there's a scavenger hunt that you've hidden within the system to get people to click around and find everything. Maybe the winner gets lunch with the CEO. There are other different prizes. We talked about leaderboards and that recognition piece. So there's a lot of elements involved that you can use to help market and communicate the new system and drive up adoption. If you are going to do any of these sort of project type things, be aware of different company events that you have, and when your particular company is very, very busy, if you're retail, don't do it around Christmas, those sorts of things. You want to have people's undivided attention as much as possible when you're rolling some of these things out. And then again, focus on usability, right? So that's really what adoption's about. People, if they get in, once you get them to open it and log in, if it's not usable, if it's difficult to navigate, if it's counterintuitive, it won't be successful. So do you conduct formal user interface, user experience reviews? Do you actually look at that with, say, a focus group of actual end users and talk through, what, this works, this doesn't work? I mean, your designers are really, really good at what they do, and they create some amazing environments and experiences, but sometimes even the best designer can't foresee a reaction of a specific audience to elements of what they've designed. They need to actually have people using it that need to use it on a daily, weekly basis, what have you, to come back and say, it's great, but if this was here or it did this, it would be better. So always be thinking about, that UX, that UI, and how you can improve it. So again, the focus groups, do you listen to the users? Do you take the action based on the feedback, right? So even though you're listening and you're holding those focus groups, do you do anything? Because if you do, right, hold those focus groups, or if you do start to take feedback from the users, but don't actually ever do anything about it, that's going to actually be worse for adoption and engagement, because now they have confirmation that you're not listening, and so that will drop adoption. What are the different things that you can do to make it better? What barriers can you remove from the difficulties of using the system? This is when you hear all the time, how do you reduce clicks, right? If there's a piece of information, how can I get people there in fewer clicks? Oftentimes that means there's a lot of complexity underneath the surface of a system, and that's why, like a system like Litmos, right, there's a million things going on under the surface, but the surface for the user is supposed to make it seem as though like there's nothing happening. It's just a couple of clicks here and there, and I'm where I need to be. That's critical. And the thing is, you think about how people use software or how people use the web. Anything that they open, any application they open, any web page they visit, you're greeted with the first page, right? The first thing you're going to look at, it's going to have a bunch of information on it. Hopefully it's the information they need. If it's not the information they need, 99 times out of 100 people will just immediately go to the search bar and look for what they want. So the ability to get what people need either right in front of them or at least a click or two away is critical before you start to lose them. Again, does the LMS actually have to do everything you're doing? Maybe some other systems or some other platform can do some of the things you want to do. Does your LMS do the things that you want it to as far as usability goes? Maybe you don't have the right platform. And then just how do you get the content to the users faster? How can we do that? How do we facilitate that so it's easier to get to and they have it when and how they need it? Another element is utilizing ambassadors, and this goes for any initiative, any rollout. going back to that thing about early adopters and innovators who are going to jump on board, find those people that are using it and that get it and understand why the system is good, why you made the choice, why you made the decision, and those become your ambassadors to help spread the word. As great as it is when the CEO tells everyone why this is happening, and then the learning function sends out marketing about why it's going on and why they should participate, when people hear from their peers that, no, this is great, I did it for this, and I used it like that, and this is why it works, that's just even that much more powerful. So definitely find ambassadors. Find those power users, make those your ambassadors. Make sure that you have an open feedback loop with those people, so you're getting the feedback from the people that are really using it and get it, right? Those are the people you want to hear from, so you know what to do. And then again, just use them to promote and the learning programs, and you can actually have them be on in those focus groups, right? So that they can get the feedback from the users and provide immediate feedback on the way that they handle the issues the focus groups bring up. But again, even though they are champions and they're telling people, yes, we want you to use this system, it's so great, they may not be trainers for the system. And that might not be a fair role to put them in, and it might actually be a little bit counter to the momentum you can create by just having them champion the initiative or the tool. So be careful about making them become trainers. So the last little bit we want to talk about is the actual engagement, right? How do we get engagement in our initiatives, in our programs, and in the tools that we're using? We asked companies in our research, how valuable are these tools to your overall engagement strategy, right? The overall employee engagement, not just learner engagement or engagement within a specific learning course. This is overall engagement. And so if you look, social collaboration tools allowing people to work together with one another. You can see 21% say it's highly valuable to our engagement strategy. 61% or thereabouts said that it's somewhat valuable. And then look at the LMS. 38% said, yeah, our LMS is a very valuable tool for our overall engagement strategy, because this is a way to reach people and help develop them and keep them engaged in the organization. So making sure that the LMS or whatever learning platform you're using actually does that, actually engages and brings people in, is critical, because if your LMS is failing at that, organizations are finding the LMS to be one of the most valuable tools for engagement. If it's not delivering, that can leave a serious gap in the overall engagement strategy. Also, you can see gamification being considered somewhat valuable as well, by about more than 60% say it's at least somewhat valuable to them as far as engagement goes. So that gamification piece keeps coming back. So then some of the things that we also have seen as far as engagement go, a more focus on things like video. People seem to be very engaged in video. It's the way they consume a lot of the entertainment that they consume in their personal lives. They like to interact with it. It just makes sense. Even something as simple as if it's on a mobile device, it takes up the entire screen. So you're maximizing the value of the mobile device. Video is just a really great tool, and companies are relying more and more on it to deliver learning. And the video is getting more and more sophisticated. It's not even so much of a sit back and watch anymore. A lot of videos are now annotated and searchable and interactive, or using video to simulate interviews, things like that. We've just found that video is one of the most powerful tools for engagement, and the more that companies can use that in learning and have a platform to deliver it, not only deliver it, but to manage it. So I can find the videos, I can share the videos, even upload videos, has become very critical to the engagement and the adoption piece. Once you get people in with those videos and they see some good ones, they're going to keep coming back for more. And having a system, Vinod mentioned the idea of the augmented intelligence, the ability to take in all the data, and one of the functions of that is to be able to recommend, if you watch this video, peers in your group who watch this also watch this, or you liked this, you perhaps might like this, just like the way a Netflix or an Amazon might work. We found that to be a very engaging tool, keep people involved in the learning as well. So the other part is just having a wealth of different materials available helps you engage a very, very wide audience. I don't know, Vinod, if you want to talk a little bit about the content piece of all the various content. When you work with clients, what are the things that they're looking for from a content perspective?
Sure. So we've got Litmos has its own design studio where we, create high fidelity courses through our own subject matter experts, and we bring in professional speakers to actually speak to those courses. All of those are bite-sized and video-based courses. And now we have Litmos Heroes, right? The screen that you see, the screenshot that you see on your screen right now is Litmos Heroes screenshot, right? So when we are looking at the content, what we are looking at is, okay, people, there are compliance content, there are company specific content. So the content that actually has to be something that's developed by the company itself are the content that the companies are gravitating towards focusing on. Why? Because everything else is noise for them, right? So we are getting into the realm of creating content for soft skills like sales and marketing, leadership, productivity enhancements, and then for compliance and healthcare and all that the companies necessarily do not have to spend time on. Why? Because not only that content needs to be very engaging and be able to be surfaced into different devices and forms, but also the content needs to be constantly updated, and the companies do not really have the bandwidth to actually devote their time and resources on that content. So we've included this content strategy into our Litmos continuous learning suite platform also, whereby we are going to create this content and all that, and we are going to give the access to all of this content through our Enable platform, which is also part of the continuous learning suite. And you can actually buy this content and provision it into any LMS that you want to. So this content is LMS agnostic. So basically, giving you all of the flexibility and leverage that you want to use to be able to use the content in the way that you want to use.
Great. Yeah, and content is becoming such an important piece of the learning ecosystem. Obviously content's always been there, but for the past few years, there's been such a focus on the different tools and environments that sometimes content had been maybe overlooked, and now there's a real resurgence in being able to deliver a lot of different content types and experiences to everyone. And speaking of different types of experiences, we asked companies, actually in this particular study, we asked the learners themselves, how effective do you find these different types of learning? And unsurprisingly, in-person instructor-led classroom training is number one, and that's what we find when we ask companies as well. So what this says to me, and I say this all the time, is the classroom is not going anywhere. Vinod and I can talk about all these wonderful new experiences and technologies, but at the end of the day, the main way organizations are going to deliver training is in-person instructor-led classroom training. They do it really well. It's evolving. It will change over time as new technologies augment and supplement it. But it is, really the cornerstone of the learning environment. So, but then we see them saying that things like coaching and mentoring. 73% say that that's effective. On-the-job exercises, let me learn by doing. Learning from one another, 64% say that is highly effective. Again, mentioned videos, 62% say that videos are highly effective. And this is just highly effective. There was also a choice of just effective, and that would push all of these clearly much higher. But these are just the people that said that these items are highly effective. So this is what learners are looking for. They want this stuff. And so what that helps us do is create sort of like these digital learning environments, the ability to make learning that is contextual, that is small, informal, ability to deliver on mobile, have that social element. These are all the characteristics of learning that drives adoption. People are much more likely to come into the learning and adopt and stay and have learning become part of their everyday work, right? So the goal is to make learning stop feeling as though it's separate from the job, but is actually part of the work that we do. It helps me do my job and helps me get better. And just, one last thing to keep in mind though is if you are focused on adoption and you pull up your adoption and people are jumping all over the program or they're logging into the system, it's a great it's a great to be successful, but it isn't the only measure of success, right? It's just part of the equation. Just like completions aren't the whole story. There's a lot of different data that helps drive whether or not you're successful, not only with your tool, but with the different initiatives that you're driving out through learning. So once you've sort of figured out the adoption piece and you're getting people on board, it doesn't end there. That's sort of just the beginning. So one of the things I want to talk about is just wrapping up with some key points that we've already kind of gone over, but the idea of communication aids adoption. If you are going to roll out a new system, or if you are having challenges, then what we need to do is communicate from the beginning. Whenever you are starting to even think about an initiative or switching to a new tool or implementing a new platform, communication needs to start early and continue through there. You can't wait till the last minute to start talking about why it's important and why people should be adopting it. So communication will aid you in the adoption challenge. Obviously, all the points that we made about learning from marketing and what they do as far as audience and outreach and how they reach out to their audiences. Learning needs to meet the learners where they are. Instead of bringing them into these courses and classes all the time, we need to be able to push learning out to where they are, when they need it, how they want it. So being able to have a system and an environment that allows for that is critical. And when you're doing your communications, highlight the what's in it for me, which is what WeFM is. What's in it for me? That's really what it's about. It's talking about making everything contextual, right? That we talked about how it's one of the big challenges in the beginning is that people don't feel like it's relevant to them, and that's why they don't engage. Well, highlight what's in it for me. If I use this system, why does that benefit me? And those benefits don't have to be directly, you benefit like this, but here's how it helps you be better at your job. It helps you meet your performance goals. It helps you develop as a person in your profession, which all of those things will help the organization develop and become successful. So it's important to contextualize it, make it relevant, and then incentivize if necessary. We talked a little bit about some of those incentive elements, whether it's full-on compensation or just some sort of recognition or awards or gamification elements with points and leaderboards, but a lot of that will help drive the adoption. And so we've had a few questions come in, and I definitely want to spend some time and talk about the different questions and some of the statements that came in. So let's take a look at those, and I'm going to go to the first one I got here, which was so Lynn had said that often clients don't have the time or the budgets themselves to do a lot of these things that her organization similarly suggests to their clients. Any thoughts on how to do this without the time or the budget? And it's really about trying to find ways to leverage what's already exists, right? So if you already have some sort of internal communications, trying to piggyback on that, trying to leverage as many shared services as possible within an organization from a communications standpoint. If it is a platform rollout, right? If you are, if you had purchased a system and you want people, you want to drive adoption, work with the vendor that provides that system. What are the things that they've seen drive adoption? Obviously their platform is used in other organizations. What are those organizations doing? Use them as a resource for driving adoption, because for your provider, it's in their best interest that your adoption is high and through the roof and very sticky, because that way you'll continue to use their platform. So those are some of the things to think about whether it comes to time or budget. But yeah, it's always a challenge because there's never enough time or money to do hardly anything, I would imagine. So one of the other pieces here in the learning modality question by Brandon Hall, perception or measured? Yeah, it's perception by far. It's we asked learners their perception, their perspective on learning about, and it was a series of questions around how much learning they got, various different methodologies, how much time they were spending, how much did they access learning via mobile devices and so forth. And the one piece that I pulled out was, how effective do you personally find this type of learning? And so, we wanted to find that out. And then so the follow-up to that from Eden is, do we actually know or only think as learners that face-to-face is more effective? And to be fair, there's two things at work here. One is face-to-face instructor-led training is what's been going on for decades, right? So that's what everybody sort of knows. They know how it works, and so they're more comfortable with it, and they're probably more likely to find it to be effective because they've got a history of outcomes to go by, compared to the relatively short history of outcomes on newer, different ways of delivering learning. It really comes down to the type of learning that you're trying to deliver, whatever the subject matter is, whatever the outcome you're trying to achieve, whether or not one thing is more effective than the other. For certain things, being able to do it via e-learning, whether it's scenarios or simulations, obviously in certain situations those are far more effective than instructor-led training. So it really comes down to a bunch of variables, which is what's the subject matter at hand, what are we trying to convey, who is the audience that we're trying to convey it to, and what's the time frame within which we're trying to get it done, and those have a huge effect on the the effectiveness ratings. But I think there's a little bit of both going on, Eden, as far as do we know or do we think that it's effective. But I'm secure in saying that it's still considered by an outcome standpoint to be one of the most effective methods of delivering learning. So thanks for that. Another question is, what are some of your key metrics for learning success? A lot of things I look at is I typically tell organizations to try to be as outcome focused as possible. What is the state of things that is driving you to create a learning initiative in the first place? Why is it that this new learning program is rolling out? What is it that you're trying to do? That's the measurement. Yes, you want to know whether or not people enrolled and people completed it and what their grade was. Did they get these questions right? You want to know all that stuff, but none of it means anything if you're not affecting the thing that's driving the learning in the first place. And so knowing what that is and measuring, starting to think of measurement at the beginning as the initiative's being developed. Like, what are the things we're going to measure when this is all said and done? Instead of waiting until something is done and standing back and saying, okay, now let's measure it, that's when people just tend to rely solely on completion rates because they don't have anything to go by. So it's not easy. You can't necessarily do it for every single initiative you roll out, but starting with some sort of outcome, and whether it's measuring the entire group from current state to future state after the training has been rolled out and people are putting it into practice, or using control groups saying, well, this group had this particular type of training and this is their results, this other group didn't have that kind of training, here are their results, is there a difference, one better than the other, that sort of thing. But it all comes down to actual outcomes, and so I don't have a list of things because those outcomes may be different for every organization. What are the things you're trying to do? I mean, some common ones are like, obviously in sales, you want sales to increase, you want sales cycles to shrink, margins to grow, there's speed to productivity, right? How quickly can we get people up and running and so they become autonomous? Things like, if it's sort of compliance related, are accidents down, are lawsuits down because we've done this? So there's some sort of measurement that you can do because you're trying to affect some sort of change within the organization. Barbara wanted to know what modalities were least effective as judged by learners. Wow. Yeah, they. Well, I wouldn't say least effective, just it's all relative, right, on the list. I wouldn't say that they're not effective, but in that particular study, e-learning modules didn't do too well. The traditional e-learning module. Things like podcasts, which are a little bit outdated at this point, although in certain instances I've seen great success with podcasts, but just in an overall and based on the data we saw, things, those were a couple of the ones that ended up nearer the bottom. Things like published text, we asked that didn't turn out so well. Those weren't considered too effective. So thanks for some of those questions. Can we use the slides? I would say yes, that would be great. We could do that. And oh, I'm sorry, you asked again if we could show that slide. We'll do that. Yeah, so the effectiveness of modalities, I just touched on that, Vern, sorry, that they were pretty low. Yes, it would appear that they were below online videos at 62%, and that would be a correct assumption. So that's what I was just touching on, so thank you very much. And, Vinod, are you still there? I did see a question, I just want to be careful with it, but I think it's more directed to Litmos specifically, and somebody else might have had that conversation about the content. Are there any plans by Litmos to update the content with more videos or interactive elements? I think it was some of the healthcare content specifically that they were looking for, and I think you touched on the fact that you're constantly, adding and updating and curating that content.
Yes, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a continuous process, like the continuous learning suite. It's never ending, and that's why our customers are finding valuable to actually buy content from us, because they do not have the burden of developing and maintaining those content. So yes, the answer is yes.
Great. Well, Vinod, I have to say I think we managed to hit on all of the questions that came in. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your insights, from the technology standpoint of how a platform approaches some of these things and can help drive adoption. So thanks. Did you have anything that you would like to end on, or any last thoughts for folks as we wrap up here?
Yes, I mean, I would say folks to actually really, really think about when they approach, going with a learning technology vendor, whether it be Litmos or any other, is, and you touched on it also, that what is the business outcome that they are trying to achieve, right? Because it's like a reverse innovation type of thing, that if you know what the business outcome is, then you know what kind of resources that you need to put in place for that business outcome. You know what the resources are, then you know what kind of skill gaps those resources have, and what do you need to, actually provide those resources to, bridge those skill gaps. If you know that, then you know also that, okay, what are the different modalities that those resources learn in, right? Whether it be e-learning or ILT or, mobile-based or anything, then you know that, okay, these are the different modalities that I have to give. Then you can go back and start, taking a look at, okay, what kind of content is available? Is it engaging? It is interactive? What technologies do I need for us to provide learning in that modality for that kind of skill set and all that? And, it all ties together, because then when the learning happens, it hits the needle, or it hits the mark on moving the business needle, right? And that's what your business. So there was a question about the time and budget, and that's how you get the time and budget is when you show that, okay, yes, the learning outcomes are related directly to the business outcomes. And, it might be a proportion of that, it might not be 100%, but, still, you need to get a seat on that table to be able to say that, okay, yes, my learning outcomes have delivered these business benefits.
Right. And, it's funny, you mentioned that we hear all the time that, well, you can't tie learning to ROI because there's too many other variables, and we can't make that. And I always say back, well, why can't learning be one of those variables? Why are when we are confronted with the idea that there are multiple variables in place, that then learning says, well, then forget it, we won't even bother. It's like, well, no, you can show that you have an impact, and of course there are other variables, but learning is one of them, and sometimes the biggest one. But you're able to demonstrate, as Vinod was saying, that you have this impact, then you can make much more headway in generating more time and budget to do the things that you need to do. Land, we didn't pull anything from a Burson report. This is all from Brandon Hall research, Brandon Hall Group research. You can find a lot of that research. It's from various different studies and reports that we've done in our member center in the on the Brandon Hall website. No worries about the typo. Quite all right. But thanks for the question. I'm glad you're interested in the research. But yeah, that's all from our different studies. So again, thank you everybody for joining. Great questions. I appreciate the interactivity and the engagement. So thank you very much, and thanks Vinod for providing your insights as well. And again, if the handout is available in the handout section. If you want to download it, a link will go out in the next couple of days to the recording and the deck itself. And again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.